This is the second video in a 3-part series on Dark Hollywood. In the first video, we covered Hollywood's connections to some of the darkest criminal organizations in American history. The second video will be on the occult Hollywood, emphasize on Satanism and its influence on the Hollywood elites. And the third video will be on the high-end criminal cases in Hollywood and the system that protects all of this. So, buckle up. Jayne Mansfield was a Hollywood actress and one of the biggest sex symbols of the 1960s Hollywood scene. She was, depending on what angle you looked from, the natural successor, or rather a wannabe, Marilyn Monroe. Besides all that, Mansfield was also a member of the Church of Satan, a religious organization founded by the eccentric, horn-wearing occultist named Anton LaVey. A dark showman from birth, LaVey met Jayne Mansfield during her drug-induced trip to the 1966 San Francisco Film Festival. Accounts say that Mansfield was charmed by LaVey, and the two quickly became romantically involved. Mansfield joined the Church of Satan and was often photographed in satanic rituals conjured by LaVey. The starlet, however, had a boyfriend at the time, a Hollywood power insider and lawyer named Sam Brody. LaVey was sort of a side lover, a Hollywood stunt for her, if you will. Brody was extremely disapproving of LaVey's and Mansfield's relationship, threatening that he would destroy LaVey's life. In return, it's said that LaVey and his congregation performed a satanic ritual to curse Brody to death. LaVey urged Mansfield not to get into a car with Brody, as he was targeted to die. Now, whatever you may believe, on the 9th of June 29, 1967, Mansfield and Brody were driving through Louisiana when a truck crashed into their car. Mansfield was decapitated. Anton LaVey, being a sort of master provocateur, claimed responsibility for this event. His curse was successful. Whatever happened, LaVey was undoubtedly one of the most prominent counterculture figures and occultists of old Hollywood. Having founded the Church of Satan, LaVey became a sort of satanic advisor to Hollywood big shots. He was an inspiration and a key figure in Hollywood's satanic cinematography of the late 1960s and early 1970s. In fact, he was a close associate to director Roman Polanski, having been hired by him as an advisor on the satanic blockbuster Rosemary's Baby. However, because of all this theatricality, his role in the Church of Satan later diminished as he was seen as a sort of tabloid media Satanist, disrespecting the true nucleus of real devil worshippers.
What the world needs is a good whipping.
Part of his flock split from the Church of Satan and formed a much more secretive, darker organization called the Temple of Seth, led by an alleged deep state occultist and United States Army Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. But whatever his faith was, LaVey was certainly one of the most pivotal figures in introducing Satanism and occultism into the Hollywood mainstream. Now, the before-mentioned director Roman Polanski and his wife actress Sharon Tate were allegedly both steeped in Satanism. Before Sharon's murder by Charlie Manson's cult members in the infamous Tate LaBianca murders, the home of Polanski and Tate was a sort of epicenter for Hollywood's satanic scene. Actor Dennis Hopper spoke in interviews about sadistic movies being filmed at their house featuring some of the biggest Hollywood names. Hollywood actor and singer Sammy Davis Jr., himself a devout Satanist, you can see him here with LaVey and Aquino, said that all 5 victims at the Tate Cielo Drive residence had at one time or another been into Satanism. Now, what is even more peculiar is that LaVey's Church of Satan also had connections with the murderers, the members of Charlie Manson's cult. One of Manson's close associates, Bobby Beausoleil, was connected to LaVey through an underground filmmaker and occultist Kenneth Anger, whom he met in 1967 and who allegedly became Beausoleil's lover. Anger was close friends with LaVey, with whom he opened a nightclub called The Witch's Sabbath. One of Charlie Manson's girls and the perpetrators of the Tate LaBianca murders was Susan Atkins, who was reportedly one of the dancers at LaVey and Anger's nightclub. Atkins reportedly credited LaVey with starting her down the road of murder. However, Beausoleil and Atkins were only so much influenced by LaVey's Satanism, as much as they were influenced by their later, more devious leader, Charles Manson. A sort of devilish Svengali, Charlie Manson was a serial offender ever since he was a boy and spent time in and out of institutions. In fact, he was at one point briefly housed at Boys Town, Nebraska, which was later identified by many investigators as a cesspool of pedophilic operations that had ties to much larger nationwide rings. Charlie Manson came to the California scene somewhere in the 1960s and quickly started to acquire followers in the hippie community. Although his rise in that scene is shrouded in mystery with inklings of high-level intelligence involvement, it was written by some that Charlie Manson was reportedly involved in drug trafficking and contract killings, and that he had become involved in the underworld child pornography scene. Similar allegations were faced by some other actors of this story, Michael Aquino for instance. Interestingly, it was also said that many of the victims of Manson's cult were in some way also involved in the child pornography industry. Although LaVey's Church of Satan had obvious connections to and influence on the Manson family, another, much more secretive and sinister religious group supposedly had a larger role. In the 1960s, two occultists, Mary Ann McLean and Robert de Grimston, broke off of the Church of Scientology and formed a secret, underground religious group called the Process Church of the Final Judgment. With its dangerous ideology and the modus operandi of the finest Scientology teachings, the church began spreading throughout the United Kingdom and the United States, especially Hollywood. The church's activities attracted the interests of a number of Hollywood celebrities. However, their influence allegedly spread also to Charlie Manson and his disciples. Preaching of an imminent, violent Armageddon, it was believed that the Process Church's influence was one of the main reasons for the Tate LaBianca murders, whose true motives are still unclear and highly debated. Manson was also reportedly a frequent visitor at the New Age Esalen Institute, where the Process Church reportedly lectured occasionally, even just a few days before the Tate LaBianca murders. Actually, on the very day of the murders, someone from within the Polanski home placed a call to the Institute for reasons unknown. Satanic occult influence was very much present in Manson's orbit. A fully black-painted bus and a temple with Baphomet's image tucked inside, just like Anton LaVey had a fully black-painted house in San Francisco. However, the Process Church influence spread far beyond Charles Manson. In the book The Ultimate Evil, journalist Maury Terry investigates the famous Son of Sam serial killings, claiming with a lot of suspicious evidence that David Berkowitz, aka Son of Sam, was not a lone serial killer, but rather a fall guy for a satanic cult offshoot of the Process Church. At the very least, Berkowitz himself admitted that the church's teachings had a huge influence on his deeds.
So I was calling upon this demonic entity, this druid spirit, and it was like he was reaching out to me. In my mind, felt I was really getting messages from him. I was reading literature from a church called the Process Church of Final Judgment. I was using some of that literature, which was calling on to start anarchy and try to bring in the end of the world.
Maury also claimed that Roy Radin, a Hollywood producer and show business promoter, was connected to Satanism and the Process Church of the Final Judgment, and that he was potentially the leader of this violent offshoot of the Process Church that blended Scientology, Christianity, and Satanism, and that ultimately inspired the Son of Sam murders. Furthermore, rumors suggest that Roy Radin was heavily involved in the film industry, and that the Son of Sam murders were in part done to facilitate his customers. Radin was ultimately killed by a contract killer named William Menser, a man who was connected to Charles Manson and his circle. Supposedly, Radin was killed because of a financial dispute over the Hollywood musical crime drama The Cotton Club, directed by Francis Ford Coppola and starring a bunch of Hollywood actors: Richard Gere, Diane Lane, Lawrence Fishburne, Nicolas Cage, and others. Interestingly, the financial backer of the movie, besides Roy Radin, was the Saudi arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi, one of Jeffrey Epstein's associates. I mean, it is clear that satanic and occult connections thrived in Hollywood from its inception, not only on the highest levels, but also on the lower, street levels. Satanic cults were popping up all over Hollywood. For instance, the Brotherhood of the Ram or the Cathedral of the Fallen Angel on Hollywood Boulevard. In July of 1984, a fire broke out at Ram Center in Hollywood, an occult retail store. After the fire, the police discovered a back room described as a place where devil worship rituals took place. Inside, they found a coffin, 2 human skeletons, and 6 preserved human fetuses. No charges were filed, as the officials classified them as medical specimens. Now, all of these occult figures, Manson, de Grimston, LaVey, drew their inspiration from probably the most influential occultist of all time, nicknamed the wickedest man in the world, Aleister Crowley. Crowley was a flamboyant, controversial English occultist and mystic who founded the religion of Thelema, based on the principle, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," or rather, do whatever you feel like. This seemingly hedonistic ideology was in reality entangled in occult satanic symbolism and ideology, and the real dangers of it arose from the misinterpretation of Thelema as a license to do whatever you want to anyone. Such ideology could lead the psychologically disturbed to commit horrific acts. Nevertheless, his occult ideology and the persona of Aleister Crowley spread through Hollywood elites like wildfire. Jimmy Page adored him and even bought his house. The Beatles put him on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Ozzy Osbourne had a song dedicated to him called the Mr. Crowley. In 1902, German occultist Karl Kellner founded Ordo Templi Orientis, a secret occult society which was eventually taken over by Crowley, who became its most influential leader. Crowley eventually appointed Wilfred Smith as the head of the North American branch of the order, who opened a lodge in Los Angeles and quickly started to spread its teachings through Hollywood. Smith organized masses, luring Hollywood celebrities to attend them. By masses, I actually mean mass, O-R-G, if you know what I mean, with Hollywood big shots of the time. One of the wives Smith seduced was that of Jack Parsons, a pioneer rocket scientist who co-founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which later became NASA's primary center for robotic space exploration. But besides being one of the fathers of NASA, he was also an occultist and Crowley's disciple who took over the leadership of Ordo Templi Orientis from Smith. Jack Parsons also had an extremely close and weird ritualistic relationship with the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. Some reports even suggested they were lovers. These shadow groups may have also been one of the inspirations for Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, his last movie, featuring an unnamed cabal of powerful people at an orgy in a mansion. Kubrick died shortly after an executive screening of the movie, and it was theorized that the executives cut a more gruesome, revealing part of this cult from the film. Theories alleged that Kubrick was trying to expose some real-life high society cult that ultimately got him unalived. Well, it is known from Stanley Kubrick's own archives that one of the vast research materials he used for the film was a book called The Cults and the Occult by Francis X. King. In it, the author explores various aspects of the occult and witchcraft in modern history, but most importantly, it delves into the tantric cults that operated in New York City in the 20th century. The setting of Eyes Wide Shut was also in New York. Now, one of the most pivotal figures in the tantric cult scene was a man named Pierre Bernard, who established one such secretive cult, which he ran from a mansion in New York. Bernard's congregation was, of course, an orgy-type gathering that attracted a lot of rich and powerful people at the time. Bernard was also, prior to setting up his cult, accused of human trafficking and sexual abuse of young women. And you guessed it, Bernard and Crowley were connected through mutual associates and intersecting occult circles. Another interesting fact, and possibly one of the motives for creating the movie, is that Stanley Kubrick's daughter Vivian had supposedly joined Scientology around the time of Eyes Wide Shut's creation. He was reportedly deeply troubled by her involvement and was upset with the group's influence over her. This long-lasting occult influence in Hollywood has spread to contemporary celebrities as well, albeit in a newer version, blending those past occult satanic symbols with Illuminati imagery. Conspiracies about an overarching, omnipotent Hollywood society that was spawned in the 18th century in Bavaria by Adam Weishaupt and that survived underground for all these centuries and that now controls everything is, I don't have a lot of research material on that. I suspect whatever occult mainstream trend is going on in Hollywood right now is the continuation of the same LaVey the Grimston type cults, repackaged for the new generation with new cool gothic symbols such as the triangle shape or the all-seeing eye, which was actually originally never an Illuminati or Masonic symbol, but rather first emerged in its modern form in Renaissance Christian art. Original Illuminati symbol was the Owl of Minerva. However, beyond the wackiness, some real past Crowley symbolism can be seen directly. For instance, conceptual artist Marina Abramovich, who has worked with a lot of Hollywood celebrities and who was one of the figureheads in the very infamous scandal, clearly has a lot of Thelema influence around her artwork. Here's the Thelema symbol behind her. The spirit cooking, for which she got tornadoed into the conspiracy, actually has some striking similarities, in my opinion, to the Thelemic sacrament rituals of drinking menstrual blood, urine, sperm, and breast milk. But whatever her role was, whatever you may think her role was, you have to agree that her art is pretty controversial and steeped in occultism to say the least. Whether you believe these weird occult connections are coincidental or over-exaggerated, one pattern remains undeniable. Dangerous groups have always sought out the loudest megaphone available to broadcast their influence. In the 20th and 21st centuries, that megaphone has been Hollywood. The psychology of power dictates that those who crave control are drawn to the machinery of mass influence, and nothing shapes the collective unconscious quite like cinema and celebrity culture. For those seeking power, infiltrating the dream factory is essential. The faces change, the symbols evolve, and the cults rebrand themselves for new generations. But the fundamental dynamic remains. Where there is influence, there will always be those seeking to capture it for their own ends.